Jonathan Caldwell, founder and CEO of Caldwell Industries, a man whose face has been printed on the cover of Forbes twice and whose signature is worth more than most people's annual salary, walks through the service entrance of his own company's headquarters on a Monday morning at 5:45, wearing a gray janitor's uniform with the name Tom stitched above the breast pocket, pushing a yellow mop bucket with a squeaky wheel, and not a single person in the building looks at him. Not one. He swipes a borrowed keycard at the service door. He wheels the bucket down a hallway he has never walked in 14 years of owning this building, and he begins to mop a floor he didn't know existed. The uniform belongs to a man who retired last month. The name tag was never updated. Jonathan chose it specifically because it was anonymous. No one expects a CEO worth $2.3 billion to be pushing a mop bucket through the basement corridors of a building with his own name on the lobby wall. He is 51 years old, tall and angular, with silver hair he's combed back from his forehead for 30 years. But this morning, he's wearing a baseball cap pulled low. No watch. He left the Patek Philippe in his penthouse safe. No cufflinks, no Italian leather shoes, no tailored anything. Just the gray uniform, a pair of scuffed work boots he bought at a thrift store on Saturday, and a growing awareness that his hands have never held a mop before in his life. He doesn't know how to wring it out. He stands in the basement corridor, twisting the mop head the wrong way, water sloshing onto his boots, and he feels something he hasn't felt in decades. Incompetence. Pure, simple incompetence. The kind that makes your neck hot and your jaw tight. This is the point. This is exactly the point. The idea came 3 weeks ago at a board meeting that went sideways. Caldwell Industries occupies a 38-story glass tower on 6th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. It employs 4,000 people across divisions: tech, media, real estate, logistics. The company has a market cap that fluctuates around $11 billion, depending on the quarter and the mood of Wall Street. Jonathan built it from a single office in Soho 22 years ago when he was 29 and running on coffee and the particular arrogance of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone else in the room. He was usually right. That was the problem. The board meeting was about employee retention. The numbers were bad. Turnover had spiked 18% in the last year, concentrated in the lower tiers. Maintenance, food service, security, mailroom. The people who kept the building running were leaving faster than HR could replace them. Exit interviews cited the same things: invisible, undervalued, treated like furniture. Jonathan's COO, a sharp woman named Lorraine Beaumont, presented the data with the controlled frustration of someone who had been flagging this issue for months. She stood at the head of the conference table with a slide deck that showed graphs going in the wrong direction. "We're hemorrhaging operational staff," Lorraine said, "and the institutional knowledge walking out the door is costing us more than the severance. The new hires don't know the building, they don't know the systems, and they don't stay long enough to learn because," she paused, choosing her words, "because nobody on the executive floor knows they exist." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "We pay competitive wages. Benefits are above market." "It's not about money, Jonathan. It's about dignity." The word landed like a coin dropped in a quiet room. Dignity. Jonathan turned it over in his mind the way he turns over acquisition targets, analytically, strategically. He didn't feel it. He understood it as a concept, the way you understand gravity without ever thinking about falling. "Then I'll go see for myself," he said. Lorraine stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll spend a week as one of them. Maintenance, janitorial, whatever the lowest rung is, I'll see what they see." The room went quiet. 12 board members looked at him with expressions ranging from skepticism to alarm. "Jonathan," said Lorraine carefully, "that's not... It's decided. Set it up. Nobody knows except you. Not HR, not the floor managers, not the maintenance supervisor. I come in as a new hire. I work the shift. I see what happens when Jonathan Caldwell isn't in the room." Lorraine closed her laptop. "You won't last 3 days. Watch me. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that the people who keep the world running are often the ones the world refuses to see." The first person Jonathan meets on Monday morning is Hayes Ingram. Hayes is the kind of man you'd walk past on the street without a second glance, which is exactly what 4,000 Caldwell Industries employees do every single day. He is 44 years old, stocky and solid, with close-cropped brown hair going gray at the temples and a permanent squint from years of working under fluorescent light. His hands are thick, calloused, the knuckles scarred from a decade of fixing things that weren't designed to be fixed by hand. He wears the same gray janitor uniform as Jonathan, but his is faded from hundreds of washes, the fabric soft and thin at the elbows. There's a small ink stain on the left cuff that never came out. He has worked at Caldwell Industries for 11 years. He has cleaned every floor. He has unclogged every drain. He has replaced ceiling tiles, patched drywall, rewired light fixtures, repaired the freight elevator twice, and once spent an entire weekend rebuilding the HVAC control panel on the 32nd floor because the contractor wanted $14,000 and a 3-week timeline. Hayes did it in 2 days with parts from a hardware store and a wiring diagram he found on the internet. Nobody thanked him. Nobody knew. What the building also doesn't know is what Hayes Ingram's life looks like at 5 o'clock when his shift ends. He takes the C train to Washington Heights, walks 6 blocks to a 3rd-floor walk-up above a laundromat, and unlocks the door to an apartment that smells like crayons and toast. The walls are covered in drawings, hundreds of them, taped and pinned and layered on top of each other, all rendered in colored pencil with a precision that would make an architect pause. Buildings, mostly. The same building over and over. The Caldwell Industries Tower, drawn from every conceivable angle, each version counting every window, every ledge, every shadow. Rowan is waiting for him. The boy has the same close-cropped brown hair as his father, and he sits at the kitchen table with a set of colored pencils organized by wavelength, red to violet, an unbroken spectrum he arranged himself at age 5 and has maintained ever since. He doesn't look up when Hayes walks in. He doesn't need to. He knows the sound of his father's boots on the linoleum, the weight of his step, the exact number of seconds between the door opening and the boots coming off. Rowan counts everything. "Hey, bud," Hayes says. Rowan doesn't respond with words. He slides a drawing across the table. Today's version of the building, this one showing the lobby at night, the lights glowing in the windows like a grid of warm squares against a dark sky. It is beautiful and exact, and it is the way Rowan says hello. Hayes' wife left when Rowan was 3. She didn't leave because of Rowan, or maybe she did, in the way that people leave when the life they imagined doesn't match the life they got, and the gap between the two becomes a canyon they can't bridge. She lives in New Jersey now. She sends a card on Rowan's birthday. Hayes doesn't talk about her. He doesn't need to. The drawings on the walls tell the story. A home built by 2 people, a father and a son, who have learned to speak to each other in a language made of colored pencils and counted windows, and the particular silence that exists between people who understand each other completely. Hayes makes dinner. Pasta. Always pasta, because Rowan eats only 6 foods and 3 of them involve noodles, and then sits at the table with his engineering textbook while Rowan draws. At 9 o'clock, he walks Rowan through his bedtime routine. Teeth, pajamas, 3 pages of a book about bridges, lights off, nightlight on, door open exactly 4 inches. Then, Hayes sits at the kitchen table alone and studies until his eyes blur, and he falls asleep with his head on the textbook and his calloused hands still holding a pencil. This is what 11 years of loyalty to a building looks like from the inside. Hayes finds Jonathan in the basement corridor, wrestling with the mop. "You're flooding the hallway," Hayes says. His voice is flat, unhurried, the voice of a man who has seen new hires come and go like weather. "Wring it out first. Push down and twist. The bucket has a press. Use it." Jonathan looks at him. I'm new, Tom." "I know you're new. I can tell by the boots." Hayes glances at the 2 clean work boots. "I'm Hayes. I've been here a while." "How long?" 11 years. "That's a long time." Hayes shrugs. "Building needs someone who knows where the pipes run. Nobody else wants to learn." He reaches over, takes the mop from Jonathan's hands, wrings it out with a single practiced motion, and hands it back. "Like that. Start from the far wall. Work toward the drain. Don't fight the water, guide it." Jonathan takes the mop. His hands are already aching from gripping the handle wrong. He begins mopping the way Hayes showed him, and Hayes watches for a moment, nods once, and walks away pushing his own cart, a battered gray cart loaded with cleaning supplies, a toolbox, a thermos of coffee, and a framed photograph taped to the inside of the cart's upper shelf. Jonathan catches a glimpse of the photograph as Hayes passes. It shows a young boy sitting on a park bench, holding a book. The boy has the same close-cropped brown hair as Hayes. Day 1 is a lesson in invisibility. Jonathan mops the basement and the first 3 floors. He cleans bathrooms, an experience that nearly breaks him before lunch. He empties trash cans that weigh more than he expected, because people throw away full coffee cups and wet paper towels, and, in one case, an entire watermelon. He rides the freight elevator, which smells like cleaning solution and old carpet, and moves at a speed that suggests it was installed during the building's original construction. He eats lunch in the maintenance break room, a windowless space in the sub-basement with a folding table, 4 plastic chairs, a microwave with a cracked door, and a refrigerator that hums at a frequency Jonathan can feel in his teeth. The overhead light flickers. There's a coffee maker with a permanent brown stain around the carafe. 5 other maintenance workers eat lunch here. They nod at Jonathan. Nobody asks his name. Nobody introduces themselves. They eat in the efficient silence of people who have 30 minutes and no energy to waste on small talk. Hayes sits in the corner, eating a sandwich from a brown paper bag, reading a thick paperback. Jonathan glances at the cover. It's a book on electrical engineering. "Light reading?" Jonathan says, attempting humor. Hayes looks up. "I'm studying for my contractor's license. Night classes at the community college. 2 years in. While working here full-time? While working here full-time and raising a kid? Yeah." Hayes says it without self-pity, without any inflection at all, just the flat recitation of a schedule that would crush most people. He takes a bite of his sandwich and goes back to reading. Jonathan eats his own lunch, a turkey sandwich he made that morning, badly, with too much mustard and bread that's already gone soggy, and looks around the break room, the flickering light, the cracked microwave, the folding table. His executive dining room on the 38th floor has Italian marble, a private chef, and wine service. He's never been in this room before. He didn't know it existed. He owns the building. That night, Jonathan sits in his penthouse on Park Avenue, a 3-bedroom apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River, furnished with pieces selected by a designer he's met once for a price he doesn't remember approving. And he cannot stop looking at his hands. They are red. The skin between his thumb and forefinger is raw from the mop handle. There's a blister forming on his right palm that will be worse tomorrow. He presses it experimentally and winces. He pours a glass of wine, a burgundy that costs more per bottle than Hayes Ingram earns in a day, and stands at the window. The city spreads out below him like a circuit board, all lights and movement, and somewhere down there, in a 3rd-floor walk-up in Washington Heights, a man is sitting at a kitchen table studying for a contractor's license while his son draws the same building for the 100th time. Jonathan takes out the cheap prepaid phone and calls Lorraine. "Day 1, he says. "How was it?" "I mopped 4 floors. I cleaned 6 bathrooms. I ate lunch in a room with no windows and a microwave with a cracked door. Nobody looked at me. Nobody spoke to me except one man, a janitor named Hayes, who showed me how to wring out a mop because I didn't know how. And I'm exhausted. My hands are blistered. My back feels like I've been carrying something heavy all day." He pauses. "I have been carrying something heavy all day. I just didn't know it until now." "Jonathan, if you want to stop..." "I'm not stopping. I'll be there at 5:45 tomorrow." He hangs up. He finishes the wine. He looks at his hands again. Then he goes to bed in a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets and a mattress that cost more than the entire contents of the maintenance break room. And he lies awake for 2 hours, thinking about a flickering fluorescent light that nobody has fixed because the people who work under it don't matter enough to anyone who has the authority to approve a $23 ballast replacement. Day 2 is harder. Jonathan's back hurts, his hands have blisters from the mop handle, and his knees ache from kneeling to scrub baseboards. He arrives at 5:45 and discovers that the hot water in the maintenance locker room doesn't work. Hasn't worked, Hayes tells him casually, for 4 months. "Did you report it?" Jonathan asks. Hayes gives him a look. 3 times. Facilities management says it's on the list. The list is long. We're at the bottom. Jonathan makes a mental note. He's been making mental notes since Monday morning, and the list is growing in a way that makes his stomach tight. At 10 o'clock, he's mopping the 22nd floor, the marketing department, when a woman in heels walks through his wet section without looking down, leaving a trail of muddy footprints across the floor he just spent 20 minutes cleaning. She doesn't look at him. She doesn't say, "Excuse me." She's on her phone, laughing about something, and she walks through his work like he's not there. Jonathan stands still, holding the mop, and watches the muddy footprints stretch across the wet floor. He has to start over. He thinks about what Lorraine said: invisible, undervalued, treated like furniture. He mops the footprints. He starts over. He doesn't say anything, because janitors don't say anything, and he is beginning to understand why. At 11 o'clock, he witnesses something in the lobby that plants itself in his mind like a thorn. Pearl, the maintenance worker he'll later see playing cards in the break room, is on her knees near the front entrance, scrubbing a stain from the marble floor. She is a sturdy woman in her late 40s with braided hair pinned up under a bandana, wearing the same gray uniform, and she is working with the focused efficiency of someone who has been doing this particular task for years. The stain is old coffee, spilled that morning by a man who walked away without looking back. A group of executives steps out of the elevator. 3 men, 2 women, all in suits, all walking fast, all talking about a meeting they're late for. One of them, a man in a blue tie, walks directly toward Pearl. She sees him coming. She shifts to the side, still on her knees, giving him room. He walks past without adjusting his stride. His shoe clips the edge of her cleaning bucket. The bucket tips. Dirty water spills across the section she just finished. The man in the blue tie doesn't stop, doesn't notice, doesn't look back. Pearl stares at the spilled water. She closes her eyes for exactly 1 second, the length of time it takes to swallow something you can't say out loud, and then she gets a fresh bucket and starts again. Jonathan watches all of this from across the lobby, leaning on his mop. He knows the man in the blue tie. That man runs the acquisitions division. He has a corner office on the 34th floor. Jonathan promoted him 2 years ago, gave him a raise, shook his hand, congratulated him. And that man just kicked over a woman's bucket on his way to a meeting and didn't break stride. Jonathan thinks about the organizational chart he approved last quarter, the neat boxes and lines that show who reports to whom. Pearl's box, if it even exists on that chart, is so far from the top that you'd need a magnifying glass to find it. And yet she is here, every day on her knees, making sure the marble floor looks the way it looks when the executives walk across it in their imported shoes. He takes out the cheap prepaid phone, types a note: acquisitions director, blue tie, lobby incident, 11:04 a.m. He'll remember. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to Untold Hearts, because sometimes the most powerful lesson comes from standing in someone else's shoes or someone else's work boots. At lunch on day 2, Hayes is on the phone in the corner of the break room. His voice is low, but the room is small, and Jonathan hears fragments. "I know, buddy, I know. I'll be there. No, I'm not missing it. I've never missed one. Tell Mrs. Aldridge I'll be there at 3:30, I promise. I love you too." Hayes hangs up. He sits for a moment with the phone in his hand, staring at the cracked screen. Then he puts it away and opens his engineering textbook. Jonathan doesn't ask. Not yet. But he watches Hayes more closely that afternoon. He watches how Hayes moves through the building, not just cleaning, but fixing. A stuck drawer in the 15th floor office, a loose handrail in the east stairwell, a ceiling tile that's water-stained and sagging on the 29th floor. Hayes notices everything. He carries a small notebook in his back pocket and writes things down, not complaints, but solutions. 29th floor, tile B7, water damage from HVAC condensation line. Need to reroute the drip tray and replace the tile. Parts, $11. Time, 45 minutes. Nobody asks him to do this. Nobody knows he does it. He simply sees what's broken and fixes it, the way a gardener pulls weeds without being told, because leaving them there is not an option his hands can accept. At 2 o'clock, Jonathan finds himself mopping the 38th floor for the first time. His own floor. The executive suite. He passes his own office, the corner office with the walnut desk and the view of Central Park and the framed photograph of himself shaking hands with 3 different presidents. He mops outside his own door. His own secretary walks past him carrying a stack of folders. She doesn't look at him. He mops the hallway outside a conference room where, 2 weeks ago, He sat in a chair that cost $6,000 and discussed employee retention as an abstract problem. Through the glass wall, he can see the conference table, the Italian marble, the espresso machine, the art on the walls. On this side of the glass, he stands with a mop and blistered hands and a name tag that says Tom. The distance between those two worlds is 12 feet of glass. It might as well be an ocean. Day 3. Day 3 is when it happens. Jonathan arrives at 5:45 and finds Hayes already in the basement loading his cart. Hayes looks tired, more tired than usual, with dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his jaw that wasn't there before. "Morning," Jonathan says. "Morning?" Hayes doesn't look up. He's organizing his toolbox with the careful precision of a man who needs routine to hold himself together. They work the first 3 hours in silence. Jonathan has gotten better with the mop. His technique is cleaner now. His blisters have hardened into the beginnings of calluses, and he's learned to anticipate the building's rhythm. He knows that the 7th floor spills the most coffee, that the 14th floor leaves the bathrooms the worst, and that the lobby needs to be mopped twice before 9 because the revolving door tracks in rain and grit from 6th Avenue. At 9:15, Hayes' phone rings. He answers it in the stairwell between the 4th and 5th floors, where Jonathan is replacing a trash bag. Jonathan hears Hayes say, "What do you mean he's... Okay, I'm coming. Tell him I'm coming right now." Hayes comes out of the stairwell fast. His face is tight. His hands are shaking. "I have to go," he tells Jonathan. "My son, he's having an episode at school. He's autistic. When he gets overwhelmed, he shuts down completely. Won't move, won't talk, won't respond to anyone except me. The school's called an ambulance before when this happens, and it makes it worse. The strangers, the sirens, all of it. I just need to get there and sit with him. That's all he needs. Just me, sitting next to him, not talking, not touching, just being there." "Go," Jonathan says. "I'll cover your floors." Hayes hesitates. "I need to tell the supervisor. If I leave without, he'll write me up. 3rd write-up means termination." "3rd? You've been written up before?" "Twice. Both times for leaving early to get my kid. Both times I made up the hours. Didn't matter." Hayes' jaw tightens. "Building policy is building policy. That's what they told me." Jonathan feels something shift inside his chest. It's not the analytical turning over of a concept. It's not the strategic processing of data. It is the physical sensation of something cracking. A wall he didn't know he'd built, a distance he maintained so carefully for so long that he forgot it was there. "Go to your son," Jonathan says. "I'll handle the supervisor." "You can't handle the supervisor. You've been here 2 days. Hayes, go." Hayes looks at him, really looks at him, the way you look at someone when you're deciding whether they can be trusted with something that matters. And then he grabs his jacket off the cart and runs for the service elevator. Jonathan stands in the stairwell holding a trash bag, and for the first time in 22 years of running a company, he does not know what to do. He goes to find the supervisor. The maintenance supervisor is a man named Gerald Oakes, mid-50s, thick around the middle, with a clipboard he carries like a weapon and a management style built on the principle that people work harder when they're afraid. He has an office on the 2nd floor, next to the boiler room, with a desk that's covered in schedules and complaint forms, and a motivational poster on the wall that says, "Accountability," in block letters above a photo of a bald eagle. Jonathan knocks. "What?" Gerald says without looking up. "Hayes Ingram had to leave. Family emergency. His son..." Again. Gerald puts down his pen. He doesn't ask about the boy. He doesn't ask what happened. He reaches for a form on the corner of his desk. A write-up form, pre-printed, with Hayes' name already penciled in at the top. Already penciled in. "You had this ready," Jonathan says. "Ingram's been a problem for 2 years. Always the kid. Always an emergency. Rest of the team picks up his slack every time he runs out of here. His team seems fine with it. His team doesn't make the schedule, I do." Gerald fills in the date, the time, the reason. Unauthorized departure. He signs it. 3rd write-up. That's termination per policy. I'll process it this afternoon. Jonathan stares at the form, at Hayes' name, at the word termination typed in bold at the bottom. You're firing a man who's been here 11 years because he went to help his son. I'm firing a man who can't follow policy. We've got procedures for family emergencies. You request time through the portal, minimum 48 hours in advance. He knows this. His son had a crisis. You can't schedule a crisis 48 hours in advance. Gerald looks up at Jonathan for the first time. He squints. You've been here 2 days, Tom. You don't know how this works. Go mop something. Jonathan leaves the office. He stands in the hallway outside the boiler room, and he is shaking. Not from cold, not from exertion, from something he has never felt inside his own building before. Rage, shame, both at once. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to hear it. Now, back to the story. He doesn't go back to mopping. He goes to the break room. He sits at the folding table under the flickering light, and he looks at this room, really looks at it, with the eyes of a man who has been mopping floors for 3 days, and whose hands are blistered, and whose back aches, and whose sense of himself has been quietly, methodically dismantled. The cracked microwave, the humming refrigerator, the coffee maker with the permanent stain, the folding table, the plastic chairs, the windowless walls, the absence of anything, a plant, a painting, a functioning light that suggests the people who use this room matter to the company whose name is on the building. His name, his building, his company. He pulls out his phone, not the iPhone he usually carries, but a cheap prepaid he bought for the week. He dials Lorraine. "How's the experiment?" she asks. "You were right." Silence. Lorraine knows him well enough to know that those 3 words are an earthquake. What happened? They're firing a man, an 11-year employee, because he left to help his autistic son during a crisis at school. The supervisor had the write-up form pre-filled. His name was already on it. They were waiting for the excuse. "Jonathan, the break room doesn't have windows. The hot water hasn't worked for 4 months. The maintenance staff eats lunch in a room with a flickering light that nobody's fixed because the people who fix lights in this building don't matter enough for someone to fix their light. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "I understand. I built this. This is mine. Every policy that led to this moment, every layer of management that decided these people were disposable, I built it. I signed off on it. I walked past it every day for 14 years because I took the executive elevator and never once, not once, walked through the basement." His voice cracks on the last word. He presses his free hand against the folding table and breathes. "What do you want to do?" Lorraine asks. "I want to finish the week, and then I want to burn the policies down and start over." "Jonathan, you don't have to finish the week. You've seen enough." "No, I haven't. I haven't seen anything yet. I've been here 3 days and I've only scratched the surface. There's a man named Hayes Ingram who has held this building together for 11 years with a toolbox and a notebook, and no one on the 38th floor knows his name. I need to see what else I've missed." He goes back to work. He covers Hayes's floors and his own. He cleans 14 floors in 8 hours. His blisters open and bleed through his gloves. He wraps them with paper towels and tape from Hayes's cart and keeps going. At 3:45, Hayes comes back. He walks into the 5th floor corridor where Jonathan is emptying trash cans and stands there with his jacket over his arm, looking exhausted and relieved in equal measure. He's okay," Hayes says. "Took about an hour. I just sat on the floor next to him in the hallway. Didn't say anything. Eventually he leaned against my shoulder and we sat there until he was ready to go back to class." "That's good. How's the supervisor?" Jonathan pauses. "There's a write-up, 3rd one. He's processing it." Hayes nods. He expected this. He's been expecting it for months. The arithmetic has been clear, the inevitability building write-up by write-up, each one a brick in a wall between his job and his son. He has no savings large enough to survive unemployment. His contractor's license is still a year away. His son, Rowan, is on his insurance, and without it, the therapy sessions that keep Rowan's world navigable would cost more than Hayes makes in a month. "I'll talk to HR, Hayes says quietly. "Appeal it. Probably won't work, but Hayes." "Yeah?" Jonathan wants to tell him. "Right here, right now," he wants to say. "I own this building. I'm the CEO. The supervisor works for me. The policy is mine, and I'm going to fix all of it." But he doesn't, because telling Hayes now would turn this into a performance. The rich man swooping in, the grand rescue, the dramatic reveal. And that's not what Hayes needs. What Hayes needs is what he's always needed: a system that doesn't punish him for being a good father. Don't worry about the write-up, Jonathan says. Just don't worry about it yet. Hayes looks at him with the steady, tired gaze of a man who has learned not to trust reassurances from people who don't have the power to back them up. Sure, Tom, he says. Thanks. If Untold Hearts has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below, and hit that like button if you haven't already. Now, back to the story. Day 4. Thursday. Jonathan has stopped thinking about the experiment as an experiment. He wakes at 4:30 in his penthouse on Park Avenue, puts on the gray uniform, rides the elevator down to the parking garage, and takes a cab to the building's service entrance. He doesn't think about the board meeting or the retention numbers or the stock price. He thinks about the floors. He thinks about which corridors get the most traffic and need mopping first. He thinks about the ceiling tile on 29 that Hayes noted in his book and hasn't had time to fix. He fixes it himself. It takes 40 minutes, and the parts cost $11, just like Hayes estimated. The tile is crisp and white against the yellowed ones around it, like a single clean tooth in a neglected mouth. At lunch, Hayes brings 2 sandwiches and hands one to Jonathan without a word. They eat in the break room. The light still flickers. "How's Rowan?" Jonathan asks. Hayes looks surprised. Nobody asks about Rowan. "He's good today. Good days and hard days. Yesterday was hard. Today he drew me a picture of the building. He knows I work here. He's drawn it maybe 100 times, always from the same angle, always with the same number of windows. He counts them." "How many windows does the building have?" "According to Rowan, 2,712. I've never checked, but he's probably right. He's always right about numbers." Hayes takes a bite of his sandwich. "Kid can multiply 4-digit numbers in his head. Can't tie his shoes without a meltdown. The brain gives you gifts and takes things away. You don't get to choose which." "Does he like school?" "He likes learning. He hates the noise. Too many kids, too many sounds, everything bouncing off those cinder block walls. When it gets too much, he just stops. Like a computer that's overloaded and freezes. The teachers think he's being difficult. He's not being difficult. He's surviving." Jonathan is quiet. He thinks about the policies he's signed over the years. Family leave policies, emergency absence policies, the cold language of HR handbooks that reduce a father's love for his son to a line item on a write-up form. "I brought something for him," Jonathan says. He reaches into the pocket of the gray uniform and pulls out a pair of noise-canceling earbuds, small, wireless, expensive, the kind Jonathan uses on flights. He bought them Tuesday night after hearing Hayes on the phone. "For the noise. Might help?" Hayes stares at the earbuds. He doesn't take them immediately. His hands rest on the table, thick and calloused, and his face does something Jonathan has never seen in a boardroom or a negotiation or a shareholder meeting. It crumbles, just slightly, the way a wall crumbles when the mortar has been wearing away for years, and one small thing finally touches the right spot. "You bought these for Rowan," Hayes says. "They were just sitting around," Jonathan lies. Hayes picks them up. He holds them in his palm like something fragile. "Thank you, Tom. Thank you." They finish lunch. The light flickers. Neither of them mentions it. Day 5, Friday. The last day. Jonathan arrives and knows it's the end. Tomorrow he goes back to the 38th floor, back to the Italian marble and the wine service and the Patek Philippe on his wrist, back to Jonathan Caldwell, CEO, the man whose signature moves markets. But first, there is one more thing. He gets to the building early, 5:15 before anyone else. He goes to Gerald Oakes' office. The door's locked, but Jonathan has a master key card, the real one, not the borrowed maintenance card, and he lets himself in. He finds Hayes' file in the bottom drawer of Gerald's desk. 3 write-up forms, 2 for leaving early to attend to Rowan, 1 for insubordination that, when Jonathan reads the details, turns out to be Hayes telling Gerald that the boiler pressure valve needed replacing before it failed, and Gerald telling him it wasn't in the budget. Hayes was right about the valve. Jonathan finds that in the file too. A work order filed 6 months later for emergency boiler repair that cost $14,000. The valve replacement would have cost $900. Jonathan takes photographs of everything. He puts the file back. He locks the office. At 9 o'clock, he cleans his last floor. The 22nd, the marketing department, where the woman in heels walked through his wet mop section on day 2. This time, a young man stops, looks at the wet floor, looks at Jonathan, and walks around it. "Thanks, man," the young man says. It is the first time in 5 days that anyone above the maintenance floor has acknowledged Jonathan as a human being. He stands there holding the mop, and the 2 words hit him harder than any quarterly report, any shareholder vote, any Forbes profile. "Thanks, man." At noon, Jonathan goes to the break room for the last time. He sits at the folding table. Hayes is there, reading his engineering textbook. 2 other maintenance workers, a woman named Pearl and an older man everyone calls Hutch, are playing cards in the corner. "Last day, huh?" Hayes says without looking up. "Most new guys don't make it this long." "How long do they usually last?" 2-3 days. One guy lasted 4 hours. Gerald's management style tends to filter people. Jonathan nods. He looks at Hayes. He looks at Pearl and Hutch. He looks at the flickering light, the cracked microwave, the windowless walls. "Hayes, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do you stay? 11 years. You're studying for a contractor's license. You could make more money, better hours, work for yourself. Why here?" Hayes closes the book. He thinks about it. Really thinks. The way he thinks about everything. With the deliberate precision of a man who doesn't waste words. "Rowan's insurance," he says first. "That's the practical answer. The therapy, the specialists. I can't afford that on my own. Not yet." "And the other answer?" Hayes looks at the room. "Because somebody has to take care of this place, not the company. The place, the physical building, the pipes and the wires and the tiles and the people who walk through it every day and never think about why the lights work or the toilets flush or the elevator arrives when they push the button. Somebody has to think about those things. Somebody has to care. And if I leave," he shrugs, "maybe nobody does." Jonathan is quiet for a long time. "What if things changed?" he says. "The policies, the management, the break room, the hot water? What if someone fixed all of it?" Hayes smiles, a tired, patient smile, the kind reserved for well-meaning people who don't understand how the world actually works at the bottom. "Nobody fixes all of it, Tom. That's not how it works. You fix one thing and another thing breaks, and the people who make the decisions are 38 floors above the people who live with the consequences. That's just how buildings work." Jonathan stands. He extends his hand. Hayes shakes it, a firm, calloused grip against Jonathan's newly blistered palm. "It was good working with you, Hayes." "You too, Tom. You're not bad with a mop. For a guy who'd clearly never held one before Monday." Jonathan laughs. It's the most honest laugh he's produced in years. He finishes his shift at 3 o'clock. He takes off the gray uniform in the maintenance locker room, the one with no hot water, and folds it carefully. He folds it the way Hayes folds his rag, the way Hayes handles everything, with a precision that comes from respecting the tools of your work regardless of what that work is. He sets the uniform on the bench. He peels the medical tape off his blistered hands and looks at them, these hands that have signed billion-dollar contracts and never once held a mop before Monday morning. They look different now. Not physically. Blisters heal, calluses fade. But something about them feels different. They feel like hands that have done real work, hands that have guided water and carried trash and held a mop handle for 8 hours a day and earned every ache. He flexes them. The blisters sting. He keeps them. On the way out, he passes Hayes's cart in the basement corridor. The photograph of Rowan is still taped to the inside of the upper shelf, the boy on the park bench, holding a book, the same close-cropped brown hair as his father. Jonathan stops and looks at it for a long time. He thinks about the organizational chart, about the boxes and lines, about how Hayes Ingram's box, if it exists, is invisible, and how the man inside it has been holding this entire building together with a toolbox, a notebook, and a love for his son that a company policy tried to turn into a fireable offense. Jonathan Caldwell walks out of the service entrance for the last time. The city is loud around him, taxis, construction, the endless percussion of Manhattan at 3 in the afternoon. He stands on the sidewalk in his street clothes and looks up at the building. His building. 38 stories of glass and steel. His name in the lobby. He counts the windows. He loses count at 200. Rowan would know. Rowan always knows. Monday morning, 1 week later. Jonathan Caldwell walks into the Caldwell Industries boardroom at 9 o'clock sharp. He's wearing a charcoal suit, a white shirt, no tie. His hair is combed back. The Patek Philippe is on his wrist. He looks like himself again. Except he doesn't. Lorraine sees it immediately. Something in his posture, something in his eyes. He looks like a man who's been taken apart and reassembled with the pieces in slightly different positions. 12 board members sit around the table. Lorraine sits at the far end with her laptop open. "Thank you all for coming," Jonathan says. He doesn't sit. He stands at the head of the table, and he sets something down in front of him, a small notebook, battered, with a pencil tucked into the spiral binding. Hayes's notebook. Hayes gave it to him on Friday afternoon, not knowing who he was giving it to, just saying, "Keep it, I've started a new one. This one's full." Jonathan opens the notebook to a random page. 14th floor, men's room, 3rd stall. Flush valve failing. Parts, $7. Time, 20 minutes. Reported to Gerald. No response. Asterisk. He reads it aloud. The board is silent. He turns to another page. Break room light. Sub-basement. Flickering 6 months. Ballast replacement needed. Parts, $23. Time, 30 minutes. Not approved. Another page. 22nd floor, east corridor. Baseboard separation from water damage. Needs resealing. Parts, $15. Time, 1 hour. Reported 3 times. No response. He reads 6 more entries, each one small, each one cheap, each one ignored. "This notebook," Jonathan says, "belongs to a man named Hayes Ingram. He's a janitor. He's worked in this building for 11 years. He carries this notebook everywhere, and he writes down every problem he finds and exactly what it would cost to fix it. Parts, labor, time estimates, every page, for 11 years. He pauses, lets the room absorb it. Seki, Hayes is about to be fired. 3 write-ups. 2 of them are for leaving work to help his autistic son during a crisis at school. The 3rd is for telling his supervisor that a boiler valve needed replacing, a call that turned out to be correct and that, when ignored, cost this company $14,000 in emergency repairs. He sets down the notebook. "I spent last week working as a janitor in this building. I mopped floors, I cleaned bathrooms, I emptied trash. I ate lunch in a windowless room with a broken microwave and a flickering light. I was invisible. 4,000 people walked past me and not one of them, not one, looked at me like I was a person." His voice doesn't crack. It stays level, controlled, the voice of a CEO who has spent 30 years commanding rooms. But his hands are gripping the edge of the table, and the blisters on his palms, still raw, still healing, press against the polished wood. "This company has a dignity problem, and I built it. Every policy, every hierarchy, every decision that treats our operational staff as replaceable. I signed off on it. I walked past it, I took the executive elevator, and I'm done." He looks at Lorraine. She nods. "Effective immediately. Gerald Oakes is terminated. All write-ups against Hayes Ingram are voided. The emergency absence policy is being rewritten to allow immediate family crisis leave without penalty. The maintenance break room will be renovated. Windows, new appliances, proper lighting, furniture that doesn't fold. Hot water will be fixed this week. Every maintenance, food service, and security employee will receive a 15% raise, retroactive to January. And Hayes Ingram is being promoted to Director of Facilities Operations, reporting directly to the COO. The room is silent. 12 board members staring at a CEO who went underground and came back different. "One more thing," Jonathan says. He picks up the notebook. "I want every executive in this company to spend one day, one single day, working alongside our maintenance team, not watching, working. I want them to carry a mop. I want them to eat lunch in the break room. I want them to feel what it's like when nobody sees you." He looks around the table. "Any questions?" No one speaks. Then Lorraine closes her laptop. She looks at Jonathan, not as a COO looking at a CEO. but as a person looking at another person who has done something difficult and necessary. And she says quietly, "I have one question." "Go ahead." "When are you telling Hayes?" Jonathan picks up the notebook again. He runs his thumb along the spiral binding, the metal cool against his newly calloused skin. He thinks about Hayes sitting in the break room reading an engineering textbook, about Rowan counting windows, about a man who said, "Nobody fixes all of it," with the patient resignation of someone who has been right about everything and rewarded for none of it. "Today," Jonathan says, "I'm going to the break room, and I'm going to tell him myself." He takes the service elevator to the sub-basement. He walks the corridor, his corridor now, in a way it never was before, and he pushes open the break room door. Hayes is there. Of course he is, eating a sandwich, reading the textbook, the light still flickering because it's Monday morning and the work order hasn't been processed yet. Hayes looks up. He sees Jonathan Caldwell, not Tom, not the new hire in the two clean boots, but the man whose name is carved into the lobby wall, standing in the doorway of the maintenance break room in a charcoal suit with blistered hands. Hayes stares. He looks at the suit. He looks at the hands. He looks at Jonathan's face, the same face without the baseball cap, and the recognition arrives slowly, like sunrise, the way understanding arrives when the truth has been there all along, and you simply weren't looking for it in that particular direction. "Tom?" Hayes says. "Jonathan," Jonathan says. "Jonathan Caldwell." The silence in the break room is total. Pearl looks up from her sandwich. Hutch puts down his cards. The flickering light hums. Hayes sets down the textbook. His face cycles through something complicated. Surprise, confusion, a flash of something that might be anger, and then a settling, like sediment after a storm. He looks at Jonathan the way he looks at a broken pipe, assessing the damage, calculating the repair. "You own the building," Hayes says. "I do. You mop my floors." "I did. And the earbuds, for Rowan?" "From me, not Tom, me." Hayes is quiet for a long time. The light flickers. The refrigerator hums. "Huh," he says finally. And then, with the faintest trace of a smile, "Your technique still needs work." Jonathan laughs. It's the second most honest laugh he's produced in years. The first was last Friday, in this same room, with this same man. "I know," he says, "but I'm learning." 3 months later. The break room has windows now. They were cut into the wall during a renovation that took 2 weeks and cost less than what Jonathan spends on a single client dinner. Sunlight comes in from a light well that opens onto the building's interior courtyard, and in the morning, when the angle is right, a rectangle of gold falls across the new wooden table and the real chairs and the coffee machine that actually works. Hayes Ingram sits in his new office on the 3rd floor, a small room with a desk, a computer, and a window that overlooks 6th Avenue. His nameplate reads, Hayes Ingram, Director of Facilities Operations. He wears a button-down shirt now instead of the gray uniform, though he keeps the uniform hanging on the back of his door for the days when he needs to get his hands dirty, which is most days, because Hayes Ingram is not a man who manages from behind a desk. Rowan's earbuds work. The noise-canceling pair that Tom gave him has been replaced by a model specifically recommended by Rowan's therapist, paid for by the company's expanded insurance plan that now covers sensory processing supports. Rowan wears them at school. The episodes have decreased, not disappeared. They may never disappear entirely, but decreased, and on the days when they happen, Hayes leaves the building without filling out a form or worrying about a write-up, because the policy now says what it should have always said. Your family comes first. The building will be here when you get back. Rowan has drawn the building again. This time, there are 2 figures standing at the entrance, one tall and angular, one stocky and solid. He counted the windows again. 2,712. He was right. Jonathan still takes the executive elevator most mornings, but on Thursdays, he takes the service elevator. He walks the basement corridor. He checks the break room. He reads the latest entries in the maintenance log. A digital system now, implemented by Hayes, but the entries still read the same way. Problem, parts, cost, time, solution. On a Thursday in April, Jonathan finds Hayes in the basement, replacing a section of pipe. Hayes is on his knees, wrench in hand, the gray uniform on, his button-down shirt hanging on a door handle nearby. "You've got people for that now," Jonathan says. I've got people for that, Hayes agrees. But this one's tricky. Old coupling pre-war. If you torque it wrong, it splits. I'd rather do it myself. Jonathan watches him work. The calloused hands moving with precision. The quiet concentration. The same man who handed him a sandwich without a word and showed him how to wring out a mop and carried the weight of an entire building on his back for 11 years without anyone on the 38th floor knowing his name. Hayes. Yeah? Thank you for the week, for the notebook, for showing me what I wasn't seeing. Hayes tightens the coupling, tests it. No leak. He stands, wipes his hands on a rag, and looks at Jonathan with the same steady gaze he's had since the day they met, the gaze of a man who sees things clearly and always has. You mopped the floors, Jonathan. You carried the trash. You sat in the break room and ate a bad sandwich under a flickering light. Nobody made you do that. He folds the rag and tucks it into his pocket. That's not nothing. It should have happened sooner. Yeah, Hayes says. It should have, but it happened. That's the part that matters. They stand in the basement corridor, the same corridor where Jonathan struggled with a mop on a Monday morning that feels like a lifetime ago, and the fluorescent light above them doesn't flicker anymore, because someone fixed it. Hayes fixed it. Of course he did. He always does. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that real leadership isn't about corner offices, it's about knowing the names of the people who keep the lights on, please share it. Subscribe to Untold Hearts for more stories proving that the most extraordinary people are often the ones the world walks right past. Tell us in the comments, have you ever felt invisible at work, and what would it mean if someone finally saw you?